Good morning. Today's show kind of has two themes, but I've been watching this A&E series, and it has to do with, first of all, it's Nancy Grace and Dan Abrams, and they go over cases that they disagree with in a way, and then Marcia Clark does a series as well, the first 48. And whatever you think of Marcia Clark, many of you will remember her from the O.J. Simpson case, and we're going to discuss this. But they also discussed the Robert Blake case and other famous cases where the jury came back with a verdict that the public didn't agree with. And they blamed the jury, which basically is wrong. What you actually have to do is blame the jury system, our justice system in America, which we claim is the fairest and the best all over the world, right? We have it right because Americans are always right. The American justice system, just like our healthcare system, is the best in the world. Well, I think there are some people that can't get wheelchairs and oxygen that would disagree with you, but our American justice system, you are supposed to be judged by a jury of your peers. Well, that doesn't always work out, as we have learned. The first thing I want to talk about is the most important part, and I just saw Amanda Knox, the American girl that was persecuted by Italian prosecutors for the murder of her roommate, which she did not commit, by the way. But she spent a lot of time in an Italian prison, and because in Italy, they don't have double jeopardy, the prosecutors in Italy actually were allowed to appeal the overturning of her conviction and prosecute her yet again and again and again. And in America, we don't have that. In America, we have something called double jeopardy. And it is important because we have seen that sometimes prosecutors have a vendetta or a personal attitude that they're going to get this person no matter what. And we don't let them have more than one bite at the apple. That's what it's called. They get one bite, which means they are supposed to cross their T's and dot their I's before they bring a case to trial. They're supposed to have evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the person they are going after actually did the crime. And sometimes they fail. They don't do their job. But we have double jeopardy. And one of my main problems with both the O.J. Simpson case, which I'm sure you are all familiar with, and one you might not be as familiar with, the Robert Blake case, they have a lot in common, actually. Both were accused of murdering their wives. O.J., his ex-wife, and her friend Ronald Goldman, and Robert Blake, his current wife, Bonnie Blakely. Both women kind of had interesting lifestyles. They weren't angels. Both men were acquitted of the offense of murder, which means, technically, they could walk out on the courthouse steps the minute they're acquitted and say, "Ha ha, gotcha, I did it." Here's the problem. And again, I've done this before on shows. The bad news is your loved one has been murdered. The good news is a rich person did it. A celebrity did it. Because double jeopardy only applies in a criminal case. It means that this person is not going to go to jail for the rest of their life. And at one point, they were thinking about the death penalty for O.J. But they knew that no jury anywhere in America would vote to kill the Jews, okay? They knew that. So they can't get them to go to jail for the rest of their lives. But here's what the families of the victims do. They sue them in civil court, which I personally am not sure if I agree with it or not. And I've got to be honest with you, I have never had this situation personally. I don't know how I would feel. But first of all, no amount of money is going to bring your loved one back. And it just seems so interesting that over all of the United States of America, millions of defendants are found not guilty, which double jeopardy applies, and they don't have any money. And nobody gets rich. But in the O.J. Simpson and Robert Blake case, both victims' families sued the acquitted, not guilty, defendants in civil court and won huge monetary judgments. $36 million in the O.J. case and $15 million in the Robert Blake case. Now, in a civil case, the defendant must testify. In a criminal case, they don't have to. And neither man, by the way, testified in their criminal case and were still found not guilty. I'm not sure I like the idea that a wealthy person that's found not guilty will now have to surrender a large part of the money they worked for to the victim's family when they were found not guilty of the crime that they're paying for monetarily. I don't know if I agree with that, and I'm sure many of you would like to comment on that. It's kind of like I tell my husband all the time, God forbid you're ever in a car accident or an accident that, alters our lifestyle. Please make sure the truck has a big corporate name on it that hits you, so we can sue the shit out of them. That's what Americans do. We sue. When we don't get the result we want in a criminal case, we just go after the money. And we think somehow that punishes that person. And I believe O.J. Simpson never really paid the Goldman or the Brown family even half of what he owed them, because he didn't have to. They couldn't get him. There was certain money he had socked away that they couldn't touch. So he was still laughing until he got himself in trouble in Las Vegas. But that's another story. That's another show. Many people, when they don't like the outcome of a trial, when they're like, oh my God, of course he killed his wife, they blame the jury. How about, and this is what I've learned watching this A&E series, how about we blame the system? The system that treats jurors worse than they treat the defendants the jurors are charged with judging. Many jurors came forward after the O.J. case and said, we just wanted to go home. We had been sequestered for 9 months. We had less freedom than O.J. Simpson had. He was allowed to watch TV. He was allowed to see his family. The jurors were not allowed to read books, magazines, newspapers, watch television. They weren't allowed to talk to their own family members without an agent of the government listening in on the conversation. And they committed no crime, except that their driver's license or voter's registration came up in the hat and they were drawn for jury duty. And like the joke that goes around the courtroom, they were too stupid to get out of it. There's a big joke among lawyers that, do you really want 12 people too stupid to get out of jury duty judging your fate? The Goldmans and the Browns would have been wise to adhere to that, because the problem with the O.J. jury was they were not, and no offense to them, they were not educated enough to get the DNA evidence. I wasn't educated. I watched every second of the O.J. trial and I've read all the books. Knowing what I know now, of course there is no way that Ronald Goldman, a man O.J. Simpson had never met, that his DNA could have been in O.J.'s car and O.J.'s house. There's no way that could have happened unless O.J. participated in the death of Ronald Goldman. But the jurors in that case, they just tuned out. They didn't get the DNA stuff. And the prosecutors themselves had a problem. They had a problem that the LAPD was not popular among the African American community. I'm not judging, not a racial comment here. But I'm going to tell you something about two groups of people. And this is what happens when you get that jury duty notice. There is One group of people who will do anything in their power to get out of it. And there's another group of people who will do anything they can to get on that jury. They lie. The defense attorneys, they do voir dire, which basically means speaking the truth. They question potential jurors. Do you have a bias in this case? Have you ever been a victim of a crime? Have you ever... And it's not like Runaway Jury, the John Grisham movie and book. It's not. Jurors will say, nope, never heard nothing about this case. I don't watch the news. I'm good to go. And then they get on the jury and they're like, I'm going to nullify. And when a jury nullifies, it means that they don't care if the defendant's guilty or not. But they're going to right a past wrong that was done to them or someone in their family. Personally, I would not make a good juror because I have family members who have been persecuted by police and prosecutors for their lifestyle, for the fact that they speak with an accent. Their names were all over the front page of the newspaper when they were accused of a crime, but when they were exonerated of that crime, it was on page 15. Their reputations were destroyed. They were embarrassed. All because the prosecutors were like a pit bull with a bone. They didn't like that the person that they were prosecuting was gay. They didn't like that the person that they prosecuted was self-employed and had come to this country from another country, become a U.S. citizen, worked hard. They were going to persecute them no matter what. That affects the way that I would judge any case because I don't trust the prosecutors. I know so many people, some are viewers of this show, who have pled guilty to crimes they did not commit because they didn't want to go to jail. And they didn't trust the jury system. One viewer wrote to me and said, I didn't do this, and I was denied my right to a blood test after a DUI arrest. They didn't let me go to the hospital. I asked to. I wanted to do a blood test. I wasn't drunk. And then it was 3 years later, and I was faced with this group of people that I never met. All I had to have was one person who had had somebody killed by a drunk driver, and they would have convicted me just because the prosecutor was out for another notch on her belt. She was persecuting me. And I didn't trust 12 people too stupid to get out of jury duty to have my life in their hands. So I pled guilty so I wouldn't go to jail and lose everything I've worked for. Wonder how many other people there are out there. Here's the problem with the jury system in this country. First of all, most people who can get out of jury duty get out of jury duty. And people who are not able to get out of jury duty want it over with as quickly as possible, which means, as what happened in the Robert Blake case, one juror said, I thought he was guilty, but everybody else was saying not guilty, and I just wanted to go home. So I said, you know what? Screw it. Not guilty. I'm good. I'm in. She didn't vote her conscience because she wanted to go home. She wanted to get back to her real life. Some employers do not pay jurors if they're hourly or if you're self-employed and you get called for jury duty. Guess what happens while you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs in the courthouse? You're not making any money. Your clients can't call you. You can't do business. But if you get the wrong judge and you say, Judge, it's a hardship. I'm not going to be able to make a living. It's your civic duty. We don't care. My mother was on jury duty many years ago. And she was paid $9 a day at Lancaster City Courthouse. She went to the courthouse. She actually lived in Quarryville. So it was a hardship for her to get to the courthouse. She also had knee issues, so she couldn't park in a parking garage. I don't even know if they validate the parking tickets, but she drove to my house, parked at my house, and I drove her to the courthouse every morning. They didn't pay for her lunch. She had to go out for lunch, and they paid her $9 a day. Okay? To add insult to injury, at the end of that year, they sent her a 1099. She was on jury duty for 3 days. She was never called to serve on a jury. She made $27. They sent her a 1099 that she had to put on her tax return and pay taxes on that money. Really? Really? She was forced to leave her daily life, sit in a room and twiddle her thumbs in a courthouse, never got even called to be questioned to be on a jury, just because someone picked her driver's license or her voter's registration number out of a hat. And she couldn't get out of it. Now, some employers, like one I used to work for, he would always write a note to the judge. It didn't matter because, well, so-and-so is very important to our company. They can't serve jury duty. We need them in the office at all times because, they answer the phones and take orders for ice melt and toilet paper. And he got him out of jury duty. If you didn't want to serve jury duty, all you had to do was go to the boss. He's like, I'll get you out of it. Most famous people, the most educated Americans don't serve jury duty because they get out of it, because they're important. Their jobs are important. They can't be away from the office. The people who would be more likely to understand scientific testimony never serve on a jury because they get out of it. And once again, is our current jury system really relevant anymore? In England, and in my England people, friends over in England, let me know if I'm right. They have professional jurors. Jurors who are, first of all, paid well. And they serve, I think, 3 to 6 month terms. These people are vetted. They are educated. And they only judge by the law. There are no vendettas. There are no, oh, well, my brother-in-law is black and he was arrested for driving in the wrong neighborhood while black. So if that's a black defendant, I'm going to acquit him. Go, Black Power. No, they don't have that. And again, no offense. I'm not trying to start troubles here. But when you take ordinary citizens and you force them into the justice system, and they are treated worse than the people who are sitting in jail waiting to be judged by these people, you are going to have people with baggage. They're going to bring their bias. If they have a gay defendant and they don't like gay people, they're more likely to come in with a verdict of guilty against a gay defendant. If they don't like the color of the defendant's skin, whether it be black or white, their prejudices that they cannot just shred because the judge tells them, don't come in here with any bias. They can't just throw that stuff away. Life experiences, like prosecutors who act like pit bulls and try to persecute innocent people, and that innocent person happens to be someone you love. You can't put that aside when you're called into that courtroom and asked, do you have a bias in this case? You're damn right I do. Unless you have a videotape of the defendant committing the crime, I'm not voting guilty. I don't want that responsibility of judging somebody's future in that way, in that capacity. I don't think I'm qualified to do that because I come with bias as well. Now, we say that we have the fairest system in the world, that we are judged by a jury of our peers, but are they really our peers? Think about it. Was O.J. Simpson judged by his peers? No, he wasn't. O.J. Simpson rarely hung out with the kind of people that were on his jury. But they didn't like Nicole. They didn't like his ex-wife because she was blonde and white and she liked to have sex. She dressed cute. And here he was, their hero, their Heisman Trophy, their success story. A good black American guy who made it. There was no way they were sending him to jail. If anything, if Nicole had still been alive, they might have prosecuted her. They would have wanted her to go to jail for being a bad wife or a bad mother. Everyone comes to court with a bias. And that's why I think we need to change the jury system, because at the end of the day, if you disagree, if you think Robert Blake and O.J. Simpson should be serving life sentences for murdering their wives, don't blame the prosecutors, don't blame the defense, don't blame the cops, don't blame the jurors, blame the system. Because a different jury, at a different time, a more educated jury about science and DNA would have convicted O.J. Simpson. Even though I think the LAPD did play fast and loose with the evidence. I agreed with the verdict when I first heard it. I now understand that probably there was not as much police corruption as I originally thought. I do think the police thought they had their man. They thought he was famous and he was going to get off, so they played fast and loose with the evidence. And they got caught doing it. And that means the system worked. But the reason the verdict came back so quick was because those people had been sequestered for 9 months of their lives. They had missed holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, funerals. They were in prison. And in order to get out, all they had to do was come back with a verdict. And that's exactly what they did. Same thing happened with Robert Blake. They just wanted to go home. And that's what happens when you force people against their will to do something that they are not capable of doing, they're not educated enough to do, and they don't want to do. You don't get the result you want. Can't wait to hear the comments on this. And please share with me your jury duty nightmares. I'll be happy to hear them. Political Paula, out.